afternoon. Professor MacDonald, Professor Elimar Shearer, registrars, deans, members of senior management, staff, students, the media, ladies and gentlemen all. I want to let you know that I too have been associated with this institution since the 70s. My academic record is not as excellent as Professor MacDonald's. As a matter of fact, it reads more like a rap sheet. but I was here, and I did manage to slip under the radar of the academic standards of this university and graduate in 1971. And given my unimpressive track record and the tenuous nature of my sojourn at this institution, it is a tremendous pleasure for me to be given the privilege to be among such qualified alumni as Professor MacDonald, Professor Elimar Shearer, and no doubt many others of you here. It's even more of a pleasure to be allowed to attempt to influence your thoughts and your opinions for a few minutes. I was given the title to speak about as of how evidence-based research can be invaluable to strategic decision-making in the business world. I really want to take a little liberty with that theme. And if those of you who know me, I know that I take liberty. And I want to delete that second to last word, business. Data of one kind or another, the information stream is critical to all of the needs and decisions that we make as humans. Good factual data is necessary to arrive at good decisions, and bad data costs us money, time, and lives. It can be argued that maybe 10% of the data we use in organizations are part of good decision making, certainly in Jamaica. Link between effective use of data and effective implementation of strategies, policies, plans is essential for positive outcomes. So before I go on to develop that particular thesis and where we stand as a nation in our development of data, I want, if you don't mind, to use this opportunity to speak to an issue which I think is a good example of how data, good or bad, can affect not just business decisions, but national decisions and human lives and processes. For years, the management of national security has been a challenge to this country. Over the years, that challenge has been expressed in different ways and manifested by differently motivated incidents, events, and behaviors. For example, the Orange Street fire, where 100 old people lost their lives, is characterized as political violence. So, similarly, were the 1980 elections and some of the elections after. We have behaviors in Jamaica and elsewhere, but a lot in Jamaica, where romantic partners kill each other with alarming frequencies, and we characterize it and catalog it as domestic violence. In 2016 alone, over 24 women were killed as victims of domestic violence. 38 men, Professor Elimar Shearer, were murdered under the same heading. We've had 456 deaths from domestic disputes in the 6 years between 2010 and 2016. 290 males, 166 women. So much for the women being the gentler of the species. Maybe fairer, but they're not gentler. How domestic can you get? In 2017, over 50 children were killed. In 2004 alone, 430 children were shot and 119 murdered. More than 1,500 children are murdered during 2001 to 2010. We ascribe these murders under general headings, and it appears that we don't, for the most part, pay any place any great significance on these terrible events. I'm sorry to say that, but that's how it seems. I can go on with a litany of data on this subject, and I can call on Dr. UWI to assist me because he's full of data. I can refer to the weekly police reports reciting the dry statistical numerology of precious lives that have been snuffed out. But I believe I am where I can now make my point. Ladies and gentlemen, the point I'm making is that data by itself without interpretation, evaluation, and analysis has little utility. We can breathe a sigh of relief, we think, when the murder rate declines. But does that mean that crime is down? Will our society be more ordered? Does it mean that our society is safe and that we are on our way to achievement of Vision 2030? I put it to you that unless you gather all of the data sets and evaluate the specific context of each incident, you'll have fallen into the same trap that many of our well-thinking opinion leaders fall into. The murder rate is down, so Jamaica is safer. The incident of rape and sexual abuse, as reported, is down, so the society has become gentler and safer. Unfortunately, it has remained largely the case that data is not well coordinated and managed in Jamaica. Fragmentation of data production is the bane to proper utilization of data for development work. The evaluation of data by the application of scientific principles is as important as the proper gathering of that data. With that in mind, let me elaborate on my theme. And I particularly wanted to speak to the university community about this because this is where the thinking goes on, okay? And we need to think about this problem in a serious way. The PSOJ has been saying for the last 6 weeks, and before in a more muted fashion, that the security of the nation has been compromised by the actions or inactions of successive governments over the past 30 years. We argue that the failure of law and order and the exposure of our most vulnerable citizens to robbery, rape, and general mayhem is not the fault of the police only, but a much more systematic failure of our economy, our governance, our justice system, and our leadership in gathering the available data and evaluating it in a scientific manner. As a result of that, we get calls for heads to roll and erratic and spasmodic actions to be taken. We get demands for a state of emergency, for the minister to go, or for the changing of the commissioner of police. Merely reassigning the minister or changing the commissioner of police, even though it may need to be changed, is putting a Band-Aid on a cancer. We in the private sector argue that leaving our national security strategy to be determined solely by our successive governments has not worked in the past and will not work in the future unless the strategy is established by a process that is bipartisan, that is inclusive, and which takes into account all of the data sets and accomplishes the best and most professional evaluation and analysis. It is a matter of amazement to me that some of our more prominent opinion leaders can easily accept the bipartisan establishment of the Electoral Affairs Commission, the bipartisan establishment of the Energy Monitoring Committee, the bipartisan establishment of the All-Inclusive Partnership for Jamaica and the Vale Royal Talks, as well as the bipartisan Fiscal Reform Program and EPOC. However, a call for an all-inclusive and bipartisan crime summit creates shouts of, "You want a coalition government?" or accusation of partisan criticisms for the ruling party. Is it that human life is less important than electoral affairs? We need to look at the data again and reevaluate the direction of our society. The totality of our data, not just the murder rate, the volume of traffic law breakers, the amount of crime in our schools, in our communities, our villages, our homes. If we do that, we will see that the fabric of our society is being torn asunder. When we compound that with the increased economic inequalities and the historical societal marginalization of our at-risk population, we can only conclude that the state is on its way to failure. And if it continues like this, without deep and profound action across the breadth of our social infrastructure, we will fail. The PSOJ asserts that hand in hand with fiscal reform, we need to develop a plan for social reform. And an integral part of social reform is the assurance of physical security and the maintenance of law and order, justice, and discipline. What am I trying to say? The way we evaluate our data is different from the way, at the university, is different from the way that some of our leaders have historically interpreted the same data. So by the way, here's a tip for the young students amongst us. Do your own evaluation. Do it properly, considering all the variables. Use all the data available to you and evaluate your own experience. Come to your own conclusions. Think for yourself. If this is not your approach, you're exposing yourself to tricksters and con men, people who prey on your biases and fears. You have examples all around you, including even the mighty USA. I hope that you will forgive me for digressing, but the issue of law and order and the effect of its breakdown on our society is an important one. And we need to research its causes and disrupt its downward path urgently. We need, as citizens and as agents of the state, both of us, both sets, to adopt an evidence-based approach. What do I mean by that? An evidence-based approach can be viewed as a process that promotes decisions being made from an informed position. Process can be broken down into the following steps. Identify and define the objectives and needs. Collect and analyze the data. Identify the gaps. Analyze the data again. Determine action-based decisions. And then communicate those decisions for implementation. The end must bring about action. Action that is guided by data that has been gathered properly, analyzed thoroughly, and discussed completely. Let us transition, because this is the theme of the speech that I was given, to the applicability of evidence-based research to business. Why is it important to make good business decisions? Well, clearly, anybody who has shareholders to answer to and who has a bank manager who looks at your affairs almost on a daily basis will know why it is important, because it affects your profit. It affects your employees. It affects you. The quality of the decisions made by a company allow it to stay above their competitors in relation to the challenges and opportunities that may arise from technological advancements and other developments in its markets. As a result, businesses must take the necessary steps to mitigate the risk of bias in the decision-making process by ensuring that decisions are rational and can be measured and not based on personal judgments. The use of good data determines whether the outcome is positive or negative. As such, the management of data is critical, and this may pose a challenge to many organizations. The responsibility is heavy, but it is necessary. Now, companies should be charged with developing systems that support data as a shared asset, especially in a country like ours. And this is where the university comes in. This is where the university can play a role and can play a much more effective role. It is for us at the PSOJ to educate our members, because quite a few of them are still in the 20th century rather than the 21st. And in terms of the 21st century, let me just finish by saying that whereas there has been some improvement, and largely the university has a tremendous role to play and has played a tremendous role. There's been some improvement in how businesses view data and how they use data. We are nowhere near where we should be in the accumulation of that data, right? The completeness of that data. And therefore, my point in conclusion is that if you don't have all the data, your decision is going to be partial. Furthermore, where the rest of the world is going is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence depends on complete data sets. So if we want to look at it realistically, we are at the below the baby steps. We need to get our data together. It is not sufficient to leave it all to PIOJ, right? To gather the data. And you access it through their wonderful website or wherever. We have to do it ourselves. Our health sector, it is so clear that if we had complete data on our health sector, the advances in medical technology, right, in distance diagnosis could be utilized immediately. But we don't have it, right? The PSOJ is completely in favor of a national identification system, provided we are confident as to the management of its security, okay? Because this opens the door to the 21st century. So we endorse and we applaud your achievement. And we wish to seek ways to accelerate the combination of your talents and skills with the entrepreneurial instincts of our members. As Mother Teresa said, I can do things that you cannot. You can do things that I cannot. Together, we can do great things. Thank you for your time and attention.